Very good day to all of you. I'm very honored to be invited to give a short keynote to all of you. Um, at first, I thought it was going to be like standard 30 minutes, 1 hour keynotes, but I was told developers, you guys are such a hurry. Everything has to be compressed. So it's 10 minutes. So I've had to make to keep myself within check. I've had to do a couple of notes so that I do not exceed the time. It's a privilege and an honor to be here to share in what is going on in the southeast over the last couple of years. This is the fifth or sixth DevFest, I understand. So it's a wonderful renaissance that's going on within the region. Over the last couple of years, I've had the benefits and the privilege of traveling across the whole of the southeast, and I've seen the incredible energy of young people, especially in the creative sector, technology, in entertainment, in media, in fashion, in design. And it turns out these are sectors that require the only thing it requires is your imagination, your creativity, and there's very little government. So in a way, it's good. The government is not stopping your creativity, and no government ever should or can. And so it's a wonderful thing. I've been tasked to speaking about shaping tomorrow's culture, why content, technology, and community must evolve together. Um, this sounds like common sense, shouldn't it? Because you cannot create the next stream of codes or apps or any business around technology if you're not serving the community. If, like the young man said here, if whatever you're doing is not relevant to the community, then who are you building for? What are you doing? So that's key. So it sounds like common sense. Um, Personally, my own experience, I've worked in the creative sector for almost 40 years now, and I've been involved in all kinds of things from content to launching platforms and launching satellite businesses and so on and so forth. But the one thing that I found out, the sum of everything in my experience, is that the stories that we tell ourselves, um, to a large extent, determine the future that we can imagine. And it's in that sense of imagination that we create. If you lose your sense of imagination, that vision in that imagination, you cannot create. It's simply not possible. I don't know whether I'm making sense. Yeah. So, because that is really the key, that your sense of imagination is what drives your creativity. But at the very beginning, what fuels that sense of imagination is the story that you hear, this culture that you live in, the place where you were born, the experiences that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. That is really the key. And I say this is significant because we're living in a time where um, artificial intelligence, all forms of technology, is really rapidly, um, I hate to use the word, encroaching and taking us over in a way that, if we're not careful, especially because most of the tech around artificial intelligence um, doesn't seem to, we're not creating it, we're just consuming. And the same thing used to be the case many years ago, before things like channels like Africa Magic, and the same thing, digital gave us the birth of African channels, Nollywood, Afrobeats, and all kinds of things. That our primary consumption, if you were to go to a cinema, you will either see an American movie or an Indian movie or a Chinese movie. Today, Nollywood has filled that gap, that space. So we're now, in a sense, we're living in we've created our own stars, we're creating our own ecosystem. But imagine before that time, in my generation, my parents' generation, everything had to do with Elvis Presley. Everything had to do with the internet, John Wayne, international stars from Hollywood and Bollywood. So, and that's simply there is some kind of similarity with what's going on today, especially with regards to artificial intelligence. That if you look at it, if you're a regular user of ChatGPT, for example, your nuances, the things that we use, imagine getting into your car and you're using Google Map and you ask it to use let it describe, for example, OKTT. If you've ever been in a car and Google Map is telling you turn right and take OKTT, you'll be like, what's this guy saying? Can't you even pronounce don't you know? And that's the world we're living. So I work in television and broadcasting. One of the fundamental things we observe is that lighting, how we light, and this is just a small aside, how we light for white people, how technologies, how CCTVs or image capturing devices, they've been created based on the train of white people, people with fairer skin. When a black man enters the scheme, the AI in the facial recognition gets a bit confused. I'm sure some of you have seen stories of people being accosted, arrested because the algorithm said you look like the suspect, but you are totally not the guy, but just because you fit the spec. So a lot of our technologies are being developed without our stories, without our experiences being part of it. And that's the core of what I want to talk about, in the next 5-6 minutes. That as developers, we have to make the effort. We have to, first of all, recognize that we're on the back foot and we need to play catch up and play catch up rather aggressively in order for us, for our stories. Because what is AI? What is ChatGPT? It's basically regurgitating information. Yes, it's called reasoning, but it cannot reason in a vacuum. It reasons with inputs and data sets that are already been programmed by guys living in Los Altos, in California, guys living in China, in Beijing. That's the programming it's received. So to a large extent, we need to play catch up in terms of how our stories, the technology that we use and technology that we have to create has to be based on our culture. Because the reality is that for the most part, African stories aren't in the data sets. Someone said yesterday that if the only time people die is when people forget about them. And that's the reality. If physically I'm dead, but people keep talking about me for the next 100 years, clearly I'm not dead. But if people forget about me, then my own is truly finished, both here and over there. So the stakes for me, it's about cultural survival. Because the thing is this, if we don't tell our stories loudly today, machines will tell them poorly tomorrow. And if we don't write ourselves into the future of technology, technology will overwrite us. So I'm not scaring anyone. I'm just telling you guys the reality, but I'm putting it to you that the responsibility for ensuring that our future and the future of all of us rests in us creating. And one of the wonderful exercises that we've seen examples in China, people often look at China and say they copy a lot. There's nothing wrong with copying. Copy. It's amazing that how many years, over 20 years since the creation of Google Maps, we don't have something that resembles it here. And so for the most part, what we have to a large extent in terms of our technology seems to be applications and tools that fit the role of, say, for example, payments. So everybody wants to be in fintech. I don't blame you. That's where the money is. If I had my way, I will invest in fintechs. So there's nothing wrong with that. But there are other sides of it, the sides of culture and the sides of storytelling, because that's also what fuels, again, the number one thing I was saying, imagination. Because, like you, in my phone now, you ask me, I use an iOS phone. iOS is the operating system for my phone. But what is the operating system for humanity? Anyone guess? It's a culture. That is the operating system for us as a people, is our culture. What fuels our culture is our stories. Because the reason, if you're an Igbo person, Igbo, the reason why you're an Igbo person is because you're steeped in the culture of Igbo land. Once I take it away from you and I cleanse you of that culture, you're not an Igbo person anymore. Do you understand what I mean? So the OS, the operating system of humanity, is our culture. And our culture comes from our storytelling. And if you lose that OS, can you operate? This just becomes a brick. Just metal. So that is why it's important that even as you do the things you do, that it has to have a foundation in the stories. And I'll close this little thing by just talking about us at Afia TV. I remember a few years ago when we wanted to start, people said to me, who's going to watch regional television that is focused on the Southeast? It's not going to work. It is going to fail. And Igbo content won't sell. Everything has to go to Lagos. Emeka, why are you leaving Lagos? Why don't you do it in Lagos or Abuja, even, or even Port Harcourt? But we're here. 3 years later, and technically 5 years, we're still operating, and I think we're growing. We started in less than 16 people. Now we have a staff of almost 90 people, and that's growth. And our brand is slowly growing. So it goes back to, yes, but it requires tenacity. It requires us to be willing to fail even. And I'm willing to fail. I'm not afraid. I'm not the kind of person that will tell you I'm afraid to do something because it will fail. So what? If it fails, start again. And to most of you guys, you're all young people. The average age here is about 20-something. So if you fail at 20-something, so you're going to live probably to be 90, so 100. So what happens for the rest 70-something years you're going to live? You do more things. No one story is based on one simple misstep or failure. There's plenty of years ahead of you. Okay? So, but I think I've got a few more minutes. Every community that thrives globally has a cultural infrastructure infused in it. Whether it be film, whether it be media archives, but most importantly, it must have storytellers. The Southeast has innovation, we have enterprise, we have brilliance. There's no doubt about it, looking at you guys in the room. But we don't have enough content infrastructure. And when I mean content infrastructure, I'm not just meaning it from television or film. I'm meaning it with respect to the storytelling, because that's an opportunity, incredible opportunity for developers in that regard. We need our own YouTubes, for example. We need our own platforms for distribution. We need our own platforms for archiving storytelling, for archiving folk tales. We need our own, and all of these things can be monetized. They're not free things. They're things that you can do, you can develop, but can also make money for you. And these are incredible opportunities. For the future, it's funny. Just yesterday, we heard the news that Netflix has acquired Warner Brothers. Who could have imagined that for those of us in the media space? 10, 15 years ago, Netflix, if you lived in America, was sending us red envelopes with DVDs and Blu-rays and VCDs. Today, Netflix has bought Warner Brothers, one of the biggest media companies, platforms in the world. Why is that possible? You have to ask yourself. Why is Google, a company that started as a search engine, is now the biggest advertising platform on planet Earth. Why is that so? What's going on? Why is Apple suddenly interested in owning media studios? Why is YouTube, that started as the biggest advertising platform, YouTube, everybody wants to be on YouTube? Why? Ask yourself why. If you seriously ask yourself why, then you see that there's incredible opportunities in that direction. So, let me end by telling you this. Technology will shape our future, but culture will decide its meaning. And if we do not build the data sets, the platforms, and the tools that reflect who we are, then algorithm will define us. And presently, the kind of algorithm, the definitions that the algorithm give us, is not very palatable. So Enugu, DevFest, this is our time. So let's build technology that remembers, that doesn't erase, technology that reflects and doesn't distort who we are, technology that just preserves who we are and projects who we can become. Because for me, the future is not something that happens to us. The future is something we build, and it's something we build that reflects who we are and promotes who we are, but at the same time builds the future that we want to live in. All of us want to live in a prosperous, a more sociable, a more rewarding society. And it's not always all the time that we build simply because we want to solve problems. We can build with an imagination for what the future can look like. And we can only do that when we have this idea that we're building for a community, but we understand the philosophy of why we're doing what we're doing. So thank you all. Thank you for listening. I enjoy talking to you guys. Thank you so much.